to thank Andy Boyarsky and the DPEC committee for putting together this event. Thank you all very much. Of course, as we gather, the terrible tragedy is still unfolding down in Miami, and we send the Misha Berach healing prayers for all those in need from that terrible tragedy down there. And we hope and pray that more people will be found safely and in good health. Let us say amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Before we begin tonight's program, I want to remind all of you golfers that are out there that we will be renewing our COVID-delayed annual golf outing at the Roycebrook Country Club in Hillsborough on October 10th at noontime. Please keep an eye on your email for further information. This is our major fundraising event of the year, and look forward to your ongoing support of this event and, of course, any other support that you can give us. We have already secured a music program for the Daniel Pearl World Music Days, and as long as the current public health trends continue, we hope and pray to be able to have this year's concert in person at the temple. Tonight's talk will be approximately 45 minutes with a 15-minute question and answer session. If you have any questions, please text them to me or get on the chat line on the YouTube link or on the Zoom link for those of you that are on the Zoom link. Our speaker tonight has a very unique perspective to share with us regarding the incredible increase in hate crime, racism, and of course, anti-Semitism in our country. This evening is one that I hope will make you think. This evening is really to remind us of the pure hatred there is in the world for us just because we are Jews. October 27, 2018 might not mean a thing to you. However, if I said Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, I am quite certain that you will now remember that horrendous day when a madman entered Etz Chaim in Squirrel Hill and perpetrated one of the worst mass shootings in our country's history. This synagogue was very unique and was the home to 3 different congregations. One of them was Dor Hadash. They were all celebrating Shabbat morning services. 11 fellow Jews were murdered that morning, including one member of the Dor Hadash congregation. Cantor Cheryl Klein, who is now Rabbi Cheryl Klein, was the cantor of this Reconstructionist synagogue at that time. I can think of no one better to speak to the horror of that horrible and infamous day. While you are listening to the cantor rabbi tonight, I would suggest you also think to yourselves one thing. Why Pittsburgh and why not East Brunswick? It is out now, therefore, my esteemed privilege to introduce to you Rabbi Cheryl Klein.
Thank you, Dr. Boyarsky. Bechol dor v'dor. In every generation, Jews have dealt with hatred. May our everlasting efforts to remember our 11 Pittsburgh Jewish brothers and sisters serve to elevate their souls and fill our collective spirit with hope for a better tomorrow. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, source of life, who commands us to engage in the study of Torah. I am honored to have been invited by members of the Daniel Pearl Education Center to offer study as a way of raising the souls of our slain 11. Thank you to my machatona, Rebecca Brenowitz, who is the mother-in-law of our son, Ari, for connecting me to the special institution. It is my hope that as we explore the notion of Jewish memory and weave memories of our beloved 11 into this presentation, your hearts will be touched as mine has been from personally knowing most of the victims who I saw in shul on a regular basis for years. I am grateful that you have joined me today as we continue to spiritually and emotionally support my Pittsburgh Jewish community and other communities that have seen and unfortunately continue to see its Jewish citizens as victims of anti-Semitic violence and hatred. As Judea Pearl has said, quote, "The forces of barbarity and evil are still active in our world. The Holocaust didn't finish in 1945, unquote." This month alone, there have been 4 reported assaults on members of the Pittsburgh Jewish community. May these senseless acts of cruelty and violence, often a result of ignorant hate rhetoric and baseless anti-Semitic comments, come to an end soon. We are a strong people, and hate will never be the victor. Our history speaks volumes to this claim. Judaism is a religion built on a foundation of memory. In his masterwork on the subject, Zachor, Jewish History and Jewish Memory, the historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi, who was the Salo Whitmire Barron Professor of Jewish History, Culture, and Society at Columbia University from 1980 to 2008, notes that the Hebrew word for remember, Zachor, is repeated nearly 200 times in the Hebrew Bible, with both Israel and God commanded to remember the Sabbath, to remember the covenant, to remember the Exodus from Egypt. As Yerushalmi suggests, one might argue that the commandment to remember has been central to the survival of the Jews in dispersion over thousands of years. How else might we explain the continuity of the Jewish people through millennia of migration, persecution, destruction, and renewal? On the Sabbath before Purim, appropriately named Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of Remembrance, the Torah reading includes the following verses. Quote, "Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. He surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers, bringing up the rear. Therefore, when God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land that God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget, lo tishkach," unquote. The commandment to remember Amalek in Deuteronomy is in fact the second time this tale is recounted. In Exodus, God tells Moses to write a document as a reminder of his promise to wipe out Amalek. This is the first reference in the Torah that addresses the act of memorial writing, perhaps evolving into the concept of a book of remembrance. The explicit implication here is that the act of writing and reciting, recording history and recounting it verbally will blot out the memory of Amalek, even though every generation will be forced to confront Amalek again and again. This is such a strange irony. We are commanded to remember so as to forget. Remembrance has taken on new implications in the aftermath of the Holocaust. The commandments to remember and bear witness have been integrated into modern Jewish practice through observances like Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, and Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day. In 2013, the Pew Research Center conducted a research effort titled Portrait of Jewish Americans, and found that 73% of Jewish Americans found remembering the Holocaust to be an essential part of Jewish identity, more than any other response associated with our Jewish past. For Pittsburgh's Jewish community, the murder of our 11 beautiful souls has impacted our lives in ways that implore us to explore that Zachor, remember, means a whole lot more. We have seen the new Amalek, these cowards who attack from behind, and the destruction that that evil force can have on our people, and the ripple effects that beg the question, is anyone in the world free to live in peace and worship, or are we always looking over our collective shoulders for the next Amalek? Avi Noam Pat, Associate Professor of Jewish History at the University of Hartford and Director of the school's Museum of Jewish Civilization, notes that Zachor, in both the context of Amalek and the Holocaust, reinforces the importance of the victim's voice and the role of the persecuted in recording their history both during and after collective trauma. This act of remembrance has not only historical and ethical value, but is of great psychological importance too. But remembrance in Judaism does not only refer to historical events. Zachor also serves as a reminder of God's covenant with Abraham and the Jewish people. As part of the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, the rabbis made the theme of Zichronot part of the Rosh Hashanah Torah reading, which recounts God's remembering Sarah with the birth of Isaac. On Rosh Hashanah, the blowing of the shofar connects memory and observance. Blowing the shofar is a reminder of the covenant at Mount Sinai. In the same way on Shabbat, observance and remembrance, shamor v'zachor in Hebrew, become interconnected as one utterance in the first stanza of the Lecha Dodi prayer chanted on Friday evening. Performance of the commandments, Shamor v'Zachor, is thus a tool of memory. Every single Shabbat is a memory of two great events in Jewish history, creation and the Exodus. What happened when the Jewish people were remembered by God and left Egypt? They became a nation, and in gaining freedom, gained control over time. History for the Jewish people is an injunction that to remember is a religious imperative that falls on everyone. It is this internalization of historical memory that led the rabbis to say, as repeated in the Passover Haggadah, Bechol dor v'dor chayav adam ler'ot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every generation, every person should see oneself as if she, he, they personally came out of Egypt. Zachor brings the past into the present and forward into the future. Speaking of Pesach, Passover, niece Judy Rosen recalled that growing up, her uncle Melvin Wax, Moshe Gadol ben Yosef, led the Seders and completed every single word of the Maxwell House Haggadah, despite the drifting off of all the family members. Such was the DNA of 87-year-old Melvin Wax, retired accountant. He was a man of detail and dedication. His life revolved around family and faith. Mel was always the first one at shul in his New Light congregation. Regardless of weather conditions, Mel was always there Friday night, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning. Whether at synagogue or with his friends and family, Mel often wove, "Did you hear the one about?" into his conversation, followed by one of his trademark G-rated jokes. Mel grew up in Pittsburgh, had a passion for numbers, and used them to track statistics for his beloved Pittsburgh Pirates. His family was small, one daughter, one son-in-law, and one grandson, but they were extremely close. Niece Judy remembers her uncle as someone who lived a good life as a good man. May his memory be a blessing. As former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, observed, quote, "There is no sense in Judaism of the atomic individual, the self in and for itself. Instead, our identity is bound up horizontally with other individuals. Our parents, spouse, children, neighbors, members of the community, fellow citizens, and fellow Jews. We are also joined vertically to those who came before us, whose story we make our own. To be a Jew is to be a link in the chain of the generations, a character in a drama that began long before we were born and will continue long after our death. Memory is essential to identity, so Judaism insists. To be a Jew is to know that the history of our people lives on in us. The performance of memory through deeds, actions, and speech assists in the process of not forgetting. The act of writing, recording, and performing the events after they have transpired also ensures that Zachor, as performed collective memory that transcends the individual's perception of the present and binds Jews to previous generations, remains a central part of Judaism in the past, present, and future. So it has been written, and so I shall retell, as Rabbi Sachs implores us to do so. To go out to lunch with Rose Mallinger, Razel Bat Avraham, her children lovingly shared, was like being in an episode of Cheers. We walk in and everyone knows her name, her order, and what we would like to eat. They would come over and talk to us while we were eating, and they would become our friends. Rose was a social butterfly, warm, friendly, kind, and loving. Everyone wanted to be her friend. She would make conversation with everyone and anyone, from people in the grocery store to those in her doctor's offices. She just loved being around others, especially her family. Rose's family meant the world to her. From babysitting her grandchildren when they were young to going out for family dinners, she would find any reason to get together. If there was a restaurant coupon in the newspaper, Rosie would offer anyone who wanted to go out to dinner. She especially loved the holidays because we would all be together for meals. Every year, especially at the high holidays when services It took forever to get our mom out of the Tree of Life synagogue, where she was a longtime member. She had to say hello to all of her friends that she hadn't seen since last year. She just loved kibitzing with everyone. Everyone on Faree Street knew Rose. It was her street, and she had lived there over 65 years. She welcomed neighbors soon after they moved in and made sure that she said goodbye to those who were leaving. Her porch was her perch, where she could see all that was going on the street. It was not uncommon for neighbors to join her on that porch to chat, and she loved the company. She was everyone's bubby. Rose was a wonderful cook and got great joy from making her 5 grandchildren's favorite meals. She made the best chicken soup in the pressure cooker, of course, stuffed cabbage and blintzes, among others. She was still cooking at the age of 97. At 97, Rose was sharp, funny, and oh so sweet. Anyone meeting her for the first time could not believe her age. She truly was amazing and a shining example of someone living life to the fullest. May her memory be a blessing. In Parshat Tetzaveh, in the book of Shmot, in the book of Exodus, there is a reference to the breastplate that Aaron ceremonially wears. We are taught, quote, "And Aaron shall bear the names of the children of Israel on the breastplate of judgment upon his heart when he goes into the holy place for a memorial before God continually." The term used for memorial, the zikaron, comes from the same word as zachor, remember. What is the particular quality of memory that dwells on one's heart? Is there a way in which we could collectively embody this consciousness in an attempt to overcome the grip of doubt and darkness that clouds our lives, that could help to constructively shape our future? Perhaps we can ask the question, 7 generations forward, what is the impact of this act on the future of my future? How do we remember our future? Perhaps the injunction to not forget, lo tishkach, as in the case of Amalek, refers to the past and memory of the mind, while zachor, remember, calls us to think about the future from the memory of the heart on which the breastplate of judgment rests. What deeds of ours were wed memory and heart? How many people have documented their feelings in a new book of remembrance since the tragic event of 18 Cheshvan 5779, October 27th, 2018. Miri Rabinowitz, wife of Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz, Yehuda ben Yechezkel, known for his broad smile, bow tie fashion statements, loving medical care for his generations of patients, and dedication to Congregation Dor Hadash, paints a great picture for us as she weds memory to heart of her beloved Jerry in this story. Quote, "We were getting ready for a night on the town, a big band dinner dance in the terrace room at the William Penn Hotel. As Jerry was zipping me into my new party dress, I recited the Shehecheyanu prayer. Jer asked what I was doing. I told him that I often say a Shehecheyanu to celebrate the people, the occasions, and the things that are special to me and bring me joy. A few minutes later, I was putting hot rollers in my hair when I hear noises in the living room. Assuming I needed to break up a cat tussle, I walk out, and you can't imagine my surprise to find Jerry with a wand in his hand, star-shaped with sparkling green glitter, wearing only his tidy whities and black dress socks. He does a pirouette. Did you know, by the way, that Jerry was an accomplished figure skater? And he taps a wall sculpture we bought at the Shadyside Arts Festival and says a single word, Shehecheyanu. Then he pirouettes and taps Maggie, the first kitty we got as a couple, and says, Shehecheyanu. Then he pirouettes and taps a bookshelf with his cherished Chumash commentaries and says, Shehecheyanu. And then he pirouettes to me, holds me tight, and says, I saved my biggest Shehecheyanu to thank God for bringing you into my life. The Shehecheyanu is the quintessential prayer that thanks God for giving us life, sustaining us, and allowing us to reach joyous occasions. For all of the remaining years together, whether sitting on the deck gazing at the moon, or over a glass of wine, or just sitting quietly reading, Jer would look to Miri and say, Shehecheyanu. May Jerry's memory be a blessing. Contemplating Jewish memory brings me back to the Passover Haggadah, which states, "Bechol dor v'dor chayav adam lir'ot et atzmo ki ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim." In every generation, a person should see oneself as one who came out of Egypt. The memory of this slavery and this redemption is to be the touchstone of our seeing ourselves, of our understanding ourselves. The Haggadah, as it develops in the Middle Ages, in the years of crusades and expulsions and terror, even emphasizes this message by saying, Ella shebechol dor v'dor, in every generation, omdim aleinu lachalotenu, there arose those who sought to destroy us. Ve'akadosh baruch hu, and the Holy One, matzilenu miyadam, saved us from their hands. Some Jews prefer a slightly different version of looking at Jewish identity based on a single letter difference. The letter He, as it appears in Moses Maimonides' text of the Haggadah, as he presents it in his code of Jewish law, the Mishnah Torah. In the Rambam's Haggadah, the verse reads, Bechol dor v'dor chayav adam leharot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every generation, a person must show him or herself. In every generation, a Jew must be seen by others. In every generation, a Jew must demonstrate that he or she had personally gone forth from Egypt. To show oneself as a person who has gone out of Egypt, to be seen by others as a person who has gone out of Egypt, means that our actions, and not only our thoughts, will demonstrate that we understand the mechanics of oppression and the precarious situation of minorities, what it's like to be a foreigner, an immigrant, by what we stand for and act upon, not only what we think about ourselves. When we try to understand the reason for Maimonides' version for the small addition of a single letter to the text, perhaps we can postulate that there are two different types of Jewish memory and identity. Lir'ot et atzmo, to see oneself as one who went forth from Egypt, is self-referential, inward-looking memory, which ends at the boundaries of the group. Leharot et atzmo, to be seen as one who went forth from Egypt, turns the focus to how our behavior appears to others and how we engage with them. Jewish memory and identity is not only about what happened to us, though this is part of it. Jewish memory and identity is about knowing in every generation what it feels like to be the object of hatred, misunderstanding, violence, and injustice. Memory is about retaining that sensitivity to these experiences and to be active in confronting them as an expression of our Jewish identity. How does the Torah understand this memory? Over and over again, it gives us commandments which end with the phrase, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, or words that parallel that sentiment. In Exodus chapter 23, verse 9, it says, do not oppress the stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, for you were strangers in Egypt. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 33, it says, do not wrong the foreigner who lives in your midst. He shall have the rights of citizens, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And the text then goes on to say, you shall have honest weights and scales. I am the Lord your God who freed you from the land of Egypt. Further on in Leviticus, in chapter 25, it declares, if your countryman falls on economic hardship, do not take advantage of his situation. Do not take interest from the poor or charge him interest for food. I am the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Irving Younger, Yitzchak Chaim ben Menachem, was a regular presence at shul where he stood at the back of the chapel at his Tree of Life synagogue. His gentle nature and friendly demeanor welcomed the regulars as well as the stranger. He embodied the Torah's narrative to identify events of the past in order to behave in a way that demonstrates sensitivity to experiences. Through his life, Irving Younger always found time to spend with his friends and family. He was a charismatic and outgoing man who loved to listen and cared so deeply about what was going on in other people's lives. He could constantly be found chatting with people, peppering those conversations with jokes and frequent bursts of laughter. Beyond family and friends, two other important things for Irv were his religion and his sense of community. Squirrel Hill was both his home and where he made his livelihood in real estate. He was a highly devout man whose life and character was guided by the religious principles he observed. May his memory be a blessing. Zikaron. Memory in the Torah is not about where we have come from, about what was done to us. The memory of Egypt in the Torah is most often about how we will act towards others. In Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 19, we are reminded that, quote, when you reap the harvest of your field or the grapes of your vineyard, do not reap them all the way. Leave them for the stranger, the fatherless, the widow. Always remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Unquote. Let me share with you some memories of Dr. Richard Gottfried, Yosef ben Chaim, a true appreciator of the grapes from the vine. After Richard Gottfried, a dentist, lost his father in 1992, he began saying the mourner's prayer known as Kaddish every day to honor his father's memory. He started attending services regularly at New Light Congregation in Squirrel Hill, where he later served as its president. In 1980, Richard married Margaret, known as Peg Durachko, a dental school classmate and practicing Roman Catholic. They shared a genuine respect and were completely supportive of how dedicated each was to their faiths. Richard's wife, Peg, said that the three of Richard's most memorable traits were gentleness, intelligence, and generosity. Together, they volunteered at Catholic Charities' free dental clinic. Since 2011, the couple worked part-time at the Squirrel Hill Medical Center's dental clinic, where they provided dental care to refugees and immigrants, many of whom had never seen a dentist. Dr. Gottfried enjoyed working out, golfing, reading, and running. He finished 28 of Pittsburgh's great races. He read regularly about wine and collected it too. He enjoyed a glass of good wine with his Shabbat dinner on Friday nights, and on special occasions, he brought wine to synagogue functions. In a Pittsburgh Post-Gazette story, Richard's wife, Peg, said, quote, do not let Richard's death be in vain. Drive out evil from your own life and help another to drive it out of their life. The only way to combat evil is with love, unquote. May Richard's memory be a blessing. As we remember those whose lives were tragically ended by violence, I want to stress how the Jewish people's connection to Torah grounds us to see the value in this body of work that profoundly enriches our lives. The Torah calls upon us to act with purpose, to never forget what history has shown us, to be forward-thinking, to repair the brokenness of the world, to envelop ourselves in its wisdom and capture its rituals with reverence and beauty. Speaking of beauty, for 62 years, Bernice, Bela Rachel Bat Moshe, and Sylvan Simon Zalman Shachna ben Menachem Mendel, who were married at a candlelit ceremony at the Tree of Life Synagogue, dedicated themselves to each other and their Judaism. Our parents did everything together as a married couple, said the Simons children in a statement following the deaths of their beloved parents. Their grandchildren recalled visits with Bubby and Zadie, Grandma and Grandpa. They recalled Bubby singing songs like A Bushel and a Peck and You Are My Sunshine when they were young. They set an example for all as a beacon of light to shine throughout the world, which can ultimately mitigate and eliminate the hate that led to their untimely deaths, said their son, Mark Simon, in a statement to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Bernice always seemed to maintain a fully stocked fridge in the spirit of Jewish hospitality to feed all with an open heart. One family member recalled Sylvan sitting in his living room chair watching the Pirates on TV and asking Bernice to make him a sandwich. Make it yourself, she'd reply, to which he'd say, but you make it better. As Sylvan slowed down physically, he used a walker and required some assistance, but that never slowed him down from coming to synagogue services. Sylvan was particularly moved when, being no longer able to lift up the Torah after its reading on Shabbat due to its weight, he was provided a lighter Torah, one that he could use to fulfill that high point in the service. Sylvan and Bernice persevered even amid the grief of losing a son to a motorcycle accident in 2010. Daughter Michelle Simon Weiss lives with the memory of her parents, Sylvan and Bernice, always calling on her birthday to sing to her, which was followed by an enjoyable, great conversation. Michelle sadly notes, that will never happen again. May Bernice and Sylvan's memory be a blessing. Memories trigger connectedness. A common Jewish expression is dor lador, from generation to generation. The notion of zachor, remembrance, seeks to promote a way of being, belonging, and behaving. It teaches us to celebrate our multifaceted identity, to take pride in who we are and why being Jewish is so central to our lives. Connecting to the strength and wisdom of our ancestors, the contributions they have made to civilization for the betterment of all humans, beckons us to preserve our way of life, regardless of the evil forces of those who seek to destroy us. The rhythm of the Jewish calendar frames our year, month, and week, allowing multiple opportunities to celebrate, commemorate, and connect. This rhythm compels us to ensure that the legacy of the next generation will have the tools and resources to inherit and transform Jewish life in their own time and place. Eli Rosenthal, father of Cecil, Chaim ben Eliezer, and David ben Eliezer, lovingly known as the boys, said that, quote, "The boys created a legacy for themselves. There was no intent or personal agenda for this to be the case. The innocence of their pureness touched the world with their goodness," unquote. Diane Rosenthal, sister of the boys, shared that one of the most special family memories of her brothers, Cecil and David, was their involvement and participation in her daughter's B'nai Mitzvah back in September 2015. She recalled that, quote, "The night before the service, we had a big family dinner, and the boys were so excited to present the girls with their B'nai Mitzvah gifts, 2 beautiful jewelry boxes, specially selected by them personally. Cecil and David participated at the B'nai Mitzvah by opening the Ark. During the evening, Cecil greeted guests as if he was the organizer of the party, and David danced the night away with cousins and friends. They loved family and friend gatherings and loved being a part of them," unquote. Michelle Rosenthal, youngest of the Rosenthal children, shared that, quote, "Cecil and David's inability to read or write Hebrew was never an impediment to their spirituality, connection to Judaism, and love of being involved in the life of their Tree of Life congregation. Watching how much joy David and Cecil exuded when holding the Torah in shul brought a smile to everyone's face and lit up the hearts of all who observed them. Their pure goodness taught me more life lessons than I could ever have imagined," unquote. May their memory be a blessing. The common thread that ties the lives of those who were massacred in Pittsburgh is Shabbat, not a denomination or an ideology. What does it mean to be one with Shabbat? Abraham Joshua Heschel has written so eloquently on this subject. Heschel stated, quote, "There is a realm of time where the goal is not to have, but to be, not to own, but to give, not to control, but to share, not to subdue, but to be in accord. Life goes wrong when the control of space, the acquisition of things of space, becomes our sole concern. The Sabbath is the day on which we learn the art of surpassing civilization," unquote. Why are we to remember the Sabbath day? Because in the Torah it is written, "For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth and sea, and all that is in them, and then rested on the 7th day. Therefore Adonai God blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." Is there a meaningful, sufficient contemporary reason to keep the Sabbath that is more than just nostalgic? There is, and it has to do with its very nature of commandedness. The Sabbath is the only Jewish holiday observance that is one of the 10 commandments. Pesach, Passover, which is the most observed of all Jewish holidays, is not one of the 10 commandments. Neither is Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Only Shabbat has the stature, the importance, and perhaps the eternity to be so designated. What makes the 10 commandments unique is that they are apodictic. In other words, they are incontestable absolutes. They are not suggestions or requests. They are authoritative and irrefutable. There are no excuses, no exceptions, and no conditions. They are eternal, eternally true, and eternally binding. This mandate is perhaps what brought our 11 precious souls to shul as regulars. They embraced this Torah mitzvah, bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol me'odecha, with all of their hearts, souls, and might, to remember the Sabbath day, the 7th day, every single week, without fail, without excuse. A friendly man with a warm smile, Daniel Stein lived in Squirrel Hill, attended services at New Light Congregation, and was considered by his rabbi to be the consummate volunteer. He would do anything for anybody. Dan ran the men's club at Shul and was a great fundraiser. A 1969 graduate of West Virginia Wesleyan University, Dan earned a bachelor's degree in Spanish with the hope of becoming an interpreter at the United Nations. In 1972, he married his wife Sharon at B'nai Israel, a conservative synagogue in Pittsburgh that shuttered its doors a number of years ago. The couple had 2 children, Joseph and Lee. My dad was a simple man and did not require much, wrote his son in a Facebook post, noting that 2 of his father's great joys were his synagogue and his grandson Henry. Sharon Stein, loving wife of Dan Stein, Daniel Avraham ben Baruch, reminds us just how dedicated her husband was to Shabbat, Torah tradition, and living a rich Jewish life. She shared that Danny practiced his religion all of his life. It was extremely relevant. He recited his Haftarah, the words of the prophets associated with the Torah reading that he had learned when preparing to become a bar mitzvah at age 13. He did this annually and documented the event in the original book from which he had learned. My son has followed the tradition and recites his Haftarah every year. Our family will never forget what happened, but the concerns of the community helps. May Danny's memory be a blessing. We hear over and over how central attending Shabbat services was to the victims. But why? What makes Shabbat so important, so uncompromisable, and so essential to the moral structure of the universe? The command to remember Shabbat is immediately followed by, "Thus says Adonai, let my people go that they may serve me." We serve God, not dictators, kings, queens, prime ministers, or presidents. We serve only God, and in doing so, paradoxically, we are most free and therefore most human. We rest as God rested because God demonstrated in Egypt. And we continue to bear witness as we recite the Kiddush over wine week in and week out, that we are not only God created, we are God liberated. Once a week, God commands us to be liberated from our work, the devices that increasingly rule our time, our thoughts, our interactions, and our discourse. What might it mean to rediscover, to redefine, or even to reimagine Shabbat as a day on which we relinquish the idolatries of the other 6 days of the week, a day on which we contemplate creation that is not ours, a day on which nothing claims us but the deepest yearnings of our hearts and souls and the loftiest aspirations of our hearts and spirits, a day on which we assert and affirm our freedom from all dominance, a day in which we, as liberated human beings, rediscover our essential humanity and thereby deliver the unique Jewish message that only God is absolute. What a tribute this would be to our Pittsburgh 11. They got it. Their actions demonstrated the importance of reclaiming their humanity by remembering Shabbat, Zachor et HaShabbat. Joyce Feinberg, Edith Biltzi bat Abba Menachem, had recently joined the board of Tree of Life, making it her mission to help revitalize the congregation, whose membership is getting older. She attended services there nearly every morning, usually picking up other members along the way. "We knew she was there when we heard the news," said her daughter-in-law, Marnie Feinberg of Vienna, Virginia. "We didn't have to ask anybody." Joyce, a retired researcher at the University of Pittsburgh's Learning, Research, and Development Center, threw herself into volunteer work following the death of her husband, Stephen E. Feinberg. She frequently opened the synagogue building, prepared food, and helped out in any way. No one asked her to do it. She just did it. Joyce had been described by a colleague as very intelligent and engaging and had a certain elegance to her demeanor that isn't always found in an academic context. She was warm, smiled easily, and seemed to make people feel at ease when they interacted with her. Graduate students remembered her as a surrogate mother, a warm host who welcomed them into her family's home and kept sending holiday cards for years afterwards. She had a gift of making friends and keeping them close to her. Howard Feinberg, one of Joyce's 2 sons, shared, quote, "Taking the concept literally, Mom had a knack for keeping track of and celebrating every birthday, anniversary, etc. She would stay up late every night to send letters and later emails to friends and family all over the world on such special occasions, as well as just to say hi and to keep in touch. Part of that knack was her endless post-it notes and reminders on index cards taped up all over the house. It takes a lot of organizing to remember all those dates and people. That was Joyce. She was all about Zahor, remembering. May her memory be a blessing. Memory is what we have left from how we position ourselves in life, who we relate to, what we are involved in, how we integrate our lives into the community, where we choose to live, why we select the friends we have, when we continue to create new experiences, how we find a platform to influence others based upon our family history and the stories we tell and retell. Memory is auditory, it is visual, it is kinetic and never stagnant, as it requires an action. The old adage of when a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if no one is there to witness it? Begs the question, if memory remains only in one's thoughts, is it truly a memory if no one is the recipient of the thought? Memory is more than Zahor. It is more than a name. It is more than an idea. Memory is the mind's ability to recall, which leads us to react. When we study Torah, it is an act to honor the memories of those who laid the foundation of commitment and covenant. When we gather around the table at Passover and tell the story of our freedom, it is an act to honor the memory of those whose struggle and fortitude challenge us to honor that covenant with integrity and interpretation. When we tell the story of those Jews who were murdered in my hometown of Pittsburgh on Shabbat, it is an act to honor their memory with the hope that we and future generations will live lives that reflect the values and beliefs that connected them to a tradition of commitment and covenant. As we remember them, we encircle their grief-stricken family members and friends with the warmth of communal sympathy and support. When Yizkor, the prayer of remembrance, is recited for these 11 precious souls, it is palpable, it is real, and it is difficult. Scholars believe that the Yizkor service was introduced into the worship service during the Crusades. The names of the martyrs who died, al Kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of God's name, were inscribed in special books known as Memorbucher, memorial books, or Sefer Zikaron, a book of remembrance. The martyrs' names were read aloud during the Omer period, the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, and on the Sabbath preceding Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the day which commemorates several of the darkest days in Jewish history, including the destruction of both the first and second temples in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. Perhaps it might become appropriate for the Pittsburgh Jewish community to consider a new minhag, a new custom, the recitation of the names of our 11 precious souls on Tisha B'Av, L'Zikaron, as a memorial to the most tragic and evil assault on Jews in U.S. history, in hopes of carrying their memories with us as an effort of Zahor, to remember that we are strengthened to act when evil befalls us in order to continue to seek out our humanity. We will never let hate and hateful speech be the victor. We are resilient because we react not with vengeance, but with validation. As Daniel Pearl of blessed memory said, quote, "My father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, I am Jewish," unquote. By this type of affirmation, we make ourselves heard and seen. We acknowledge and honor our ancestral memory and commit to living a life of mitzvot that will embolden the next generation to feel filled with the pride to do the same. Sometimes we have to live life navigating through difficult times. What matters is how we respond. Jews find in the Torah guidance to choose life, to pursue dreams, to take a path of righteousness, to have hope, and use adversity to reflect, react, and repair. We try to make ourselves whole again by seeking out the hidden gems of friendship, trust, compassion, and goodness all around us, so as to protect us from the tumult of darkness and the stress of feeling violated. We fill our days with blessings of gratitude and internalize that we were, we are, and we will be. May we always be grateful and feel blessed for how our lives were enriched by our Pittsburgh Precious 11. For as long as we live, they too will live, for they now are a part of us as we remember them. Lo tishkach. We will never forget. We will never forget. Shalom Friedman is an American-Israeli writer, thinker, and poet. I'd like to conclude with one of his poems, slightly adapted. Time does not make my sadness any less. Time does not make my memory any less painful. Time does not change, and time will not change what I have lost and what I will always love. Time will not make me love you less, but I pray will diminish the pain so that I can remember you in all the time of our life together, not simply with sadness, but with a sense of blessedness and gratitude. No one in the world ever had a person like you, difficult in greatness, interesting in complexity, so dedicated and caring. I thank God for having given you to me. I thank God. I thank you. I will love you always. Thank you and shalom.
Rabbi, I'm having trouble catching my breath, to tell you the truth. That was unbelievable. That was just unbelievable. I think everybody in our town needs to, in our town in East Brunswick, needs to go to our town theater. We have a memorial set up to what happened in Pittsburgh. I was there today and took some pictures, and it is powerful. And people should go there tonight or tomorrow just to think about what you said, and just look at the plaque and the 11 trees that are there. And I think it all come together. I don't know how you have the strength to give a talk like that. That was unbelievable to me and to a lot of the folks who listen. Like I said, I'm having trouble talking right now. I don't have a drink of water, so you have to excuse me. We have some questions that came through, so I'd like to share them with you. What uplifting things happened to you in Pittsburgh from the community, if any, after this tragedy? Pittsburgh is an interesting town. I have some experience in Pittsburgh because my brother-in-law lives near there, so we've been there. Has a lot of bad reputation in the past, but it's quite a nice city. But Pittsburgh people are very passionate about Pittsburgh. So what uplifting things happened to you and your community?
Andy, I'm not even sure I can even begin to enumerate what has transpired since October 27, 2018. There was a global response to try and lift up the community. The community is still being lifted up. I honestly believe it will take my lifetime and the lifetime of the family members who remain as survivors. The healing is very, very difficult. I don't know that any memorial, any physical memorial can help. It may help some people to have a visual, something that they can touch, something that's tangible, but the hurt is deep and the scars remain. It's not easy even watching the process. The Jewish Federation established something called the 1027 Healing Partnership to try and help. There has been nonstop ongoing help through Jewish Family and Community Services for individuals seeking mental and spiritual help. The impact has impacted more than people whose family members were just in the building. It's had tremendous impact on families in general, on children, on seniors feeling uncomfortable and violated. Even this week, as I had indicated, with 4 new attacks in our community, the person who's in charge of Federation's security sent out a memo indicating to all that we're not to walk alone in the evening. This doesn't resonate well with me, nor is it very settling for those who try to lift us up. Unfortunately, it's been very difficult over the past 4 years dealing with a lot of the hate rhetoric that's out there, and it's become systemic. And I only have hope that our future can get better. I remember speaking at, when I gave the chesped, the eulogy at Jerry's funeral, Jerry Rabinowitz funeral.
Good night.
I remember saying the only way that we can move forward is we can't constantly be looking back, because it kind of reminds me a lot of Lot's wife in the Bible, where she looks back and becomes a pillar of salt when she's instructed not to look back. You can't constantly make the past your future, because you become paralyzed, just as she became a pillar of salt, immobile. We become immobile when we're constantly having to look back over our shoulders. It's not easy. It's never easy. So we try to be forward thinking. We try to think positively. We try to have the impact of the community help lift us up. But these setbacks don't make it easy. It's very, very difficult.
I'm sure it's unimaginable. So there's been a question asked about what's going on with the actual physical building at Tree of Life, and what's going on with the 3 congregations that were there. Where are they now, and what do they see as their future?
Okay, I can address part of that. When our communities were violated, we needed to find new shelter, and the Jewish community opened its arms to us, and all 3 congregations found places where they could gather together to worship. So New Light Congregation found a home at another conservative synagogue in Pittsburgh, Congregation Beth Shalom, and the other 2 congregations, Tree of Life and my congregation, Dor Chadash, found a home in a Reformed congregation in Pittsburgh, Road of Shalom. Since then, New Light has committed to staying at Beth Shalom. Dor Chadash has committed to staying at Road of Shalom, and Tree of Life has decided that it is going to, it has actually engaged, this is relatively recent knowledge in the last month, they have engaged Daniel Libeskind, who is the architect of the 9/11 memorial, who will work on reconfiguring the building and reestablishing the purpose of the building. I am not integrally connected in terms of what will happen to the physical building itself. It took me a long time to be able to even drive past the building, but since I have been able to drive past the building, as of 3 weeks ago, the stained glass in the main part of the main sanctuary, actually where our daughter's wedding pictures were taken, those windows have been removed for the purpose of making sure that they stay secure when actual building construction and renewal takes place, just to keep them from damage. It's my understanding also that it's been publicly indicated that the Holocaust Center of Greater Pittsburgh will relocate there into the building. And that's all I can tell everyone as of what I know today. There still is no access to the building. The building is completely barricaded, and the front of the building features a variety of different artwork that had been sent in from all over the states.
I know that Squirrel Hill is predominantly a Jewish neighborhood in Pittsburgh. What about the rest of the community in Pittsburgh? How have they reacted to this?
So I grew up in Squirrel Hill. I spent the first half of my life in Squirrel Hill, and I spent the second half of my life in the suburb of Pittsburgh. Only historical documents and photographs will be able to explain. It's very hard to explain to someone who is not from Squirrel Hill what the aftermath was like in Squirrel Hill for a year, more than a year. Even still, I think, I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't go frequent the Starbucks often, but the Squirrel Hill Starbucks, I believe, still has in its window the signs that had been painted in the window following the massacre. Almost every business in Squirrel Hill for a year had signs in its windows and door fronts that said essentially what I'm wearing, which is stronger than hate. And that hate has no home in Squirrel Hill. Now, even though Squirrel Hill is probably the area where most Jewish people live in Squirrel Hill, most of Squirrel Hill is not Jewish. It used to be back in the day when I was growing up in Squirrel Hill, but that's not the case anymore. It's probably about 30% Jewish and 70% not, but about 60 to 70% of the Jewish people in Pittsburgh live in Squirrel Hill, but most of Squirrel Hill is not Jewish. But our world is different. The world of Squirrel Hill is truly different. What we had grown up with, and what some of my friends can attest to, who are Pittsburghers who are on this presentation, can tell you that growing up in Squirrel Hill was much like living a Camelot kind of experience. We had like our own shtetl. You know, we would go into each other's homes, and the doors were always open, and you know, no one knew anybody else's family, you know, economic status. We just knew that we were all friends and that we cared about each other, and that we, you know, went to Hebrew school together, and that we went to the JCC, and, you know, that's what our lives were like. I would say the feeling is different now. I remember we went alone many times on our own when we were 8, 9, 10, rode our bikes everywhere. There aren't many Jewish parents who are having that experience with their children today, allowing them to just kind of walk freely around. We think about it. It's unfortunate, but Squirrel Hill is vibrant, and Squirrel Hill is making a comeback, and the people of Squirrel Hill are resilient, and hate will never win. Hate will never win. We are much too strong to have that be the case.
I guess on a couple of people have asked on a personal level to you, and I don't want you to like, I don't know how you're going to take this, but how can you possibly sit there and talk like this when these people that you knew, they were your friends? How do you find the strength yourself to do this?
I don't know, Auntie. I ask myself that too. I ask Hashem, I ask God, just give me the strength. Just give me the strength, because if I don't tell their story, who's going to tell their story? I tell you the story so that you can tell the story, so that others can tell the story. If we don't remember, if nobody's around to tell the story, if we feel like we're voiceless, if we don't have the strength to tell the story, then nobody gets to know. When we stop remembering, then there is no memory. when we stop remembering, nobody cares. We can't ever let that happen. I won't let that happen. I won't ever give a talk like this without talking about those who died. It's the only way that I can do it. I knew them. They were my friends. They were my fellow Jews. I saw them every single week. Just so happened that Shabbos was my week off. I think I don't think about that. I would have been in that room. The impact is, it's unfathomable. I hope nobody has to ever deal with it. I'm grateful every day, every day. I'm grateful for the outcome of the friendships that I've been able to develop as a result. I've become quite close with the surviving family members. Not all of them. It's not easy on them. These people never asked to be part of this club of survivors. It's throwing people into a room saying, this is what you all have in common now. It's not easy. These aren't people who would have necessarily picked out these people to necessarily be their friends and have to see them all the time for meetings and discussions and things. They continue to grieve. It's not easy. They are not healed. It will take a lifetime. I'm just, if I can help in any way, if I can help them in any way, I'm just there to be somebody who can listen to them, listen to their pain. My husband and I just met just last week, one of the family members. And then I met with another one of the family members who was also injured in the attack. She survived and held her mother in her arms as her mother died. I don't know how one lives through that. She's the most positive person I know. She's amazing. She gives me strength and spirit. She lifts me up. I'm there to think I'm helping, and she's the one who lifts me up. It's not easy.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm grateful.
I'm sure. Well, Rabbi, I think that, I was kind of expecting what you brought to us tonight, and you fulfilled every one of my expectations and more. Rabbi,
I'm so honored, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Rabbi, do you have anything you'd like to add? I see Rabbi Eisenkramer peeking in on the Zoom.
Oh, yes. I mean, from what I had heard, Rabbi Klein, I think, the trauma that you went through, is a process of healing, as you said. And I think that sharing the memories of those loved ones only can help provide some sense of comfort. And I'm glad you shared them with us. Thank you.
It's an honor.
Well, it's our honor to have had you here tonight. And I want to thank everybody who participated and sent over questions and listened. And I can't imagine that there's a dry eye in the house. So thank you again, Rabbi Klein, and thank everybody for participating tonight. And I'm not even sure what else to say, but thanks again, and hope to see you soon. And I hope to meet you, Rabbi Klein, in person soon.
It would be wonderful. Wishing everybody the ability to go from strength to strength. Thanks.
Amen.
Take
care. Thank you very much.
Well, bye-bye.